We are back again, and all I can say is, wow, look at how good this loading screen looks, dude. This is the new Uldaman, and honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm usually not a big fan of remakes, mostly because they end up removing content from the game just to make this. But even if they do this here, I just don't care. It's amazing. I'm not exactly sure where and when it's supposed to take place in the dungeon itself or what the connection to the story is, but this dungeon is a lot harder than the other one we tested as well. And in terms of Mythic Plus, I've already seen a lot of people complaining about it that they aren't going to like it. I think typically the best Mythic Plus dungeons are ones where you have a lot of potential skipping, a lot of different routes that you can do naturally, and this dungeon is definitely not going to allow that, like 100%. In this footage, you'll see me get absolutely slaughtered by some packs too, and I think that's also partially why people won't like this dungeon, because it seems like there is a lot of magic damage. As you see, even in this first pack, we have the Geomancers constantly casting on me and the group, and that Berserker doing a stun that if you don't move out of, you will basically get stunned and take a ton of damage. So there's a lot of mechanics on very small amounts of trash, even this early in the dungeon. Lots of things like bleeds and otherwise dangerous mechanics that the whole team might have to be coordinated to succeed at. And really, there's hardly any optional trash at all. So this room is one that has some optional trash, but you can probably skip both of these packs without any actual issue. But yeah, this dungeon does feel a lot like kind of like your Sanguine Depths, where there's actually nothing that you can skip without either using an Invispot or Shroud. Try to sneak by that, but we do get one Basilisk pulled. I'm not exactly sure if that was somebody out of line there, or if that's just always going to happen. And now we're fighting a pack with some really dangerous things. The Basilisk actually, they do like a bleed or something like that. It's actually pretty dangerous. And then as you see, our healer gets hit by the stun mechanic there, and that's it. This ain't Shadowlands Blood DK. I'm still struggling on it, so yeah, we're gonna go down like the Titanic. This is a funny moment here too. I'm not really sure what happens here. This paladin I just see running from the corner over there. There's a bunch of trash over there. This is all stuff we did need to pull though, so this is probably a good example of how you want to approach this dungeon. So here we come to the first boss, and it is a familiar set of bosses. I quite like this, the fact that this is, you know, a direct reference to what was in the past. But you know what's really cool about this fight is this is like some IP of theirs from like extremely long ago that they put in the game. But ever since they added this to the Heroes of the Storm game, so now they've taken on a new identity, and the Heroes of the Storm mechanics are now going to be used for the new encounter. I think this is really clever. There's really only one mechanic that I can tell, and it's this Longboat Raid. Upon reaching 100 energy, they activate their ultimate, Longboat Raid. The magical dwarven longboat fires its cannons at players. The rate of fire increases for each dwarf within it. Okay, so that's important because from what I can tell, they don't share health, I guess. One's way higher than the other one, and when they get below 10% health, they just leave and go into the boat. I don't know like what's exactly going to happen here strategy-wise, but two of them got killed super quick, and now they're up there just raining fire on us while we try to kill the third one. There's basically just one mechanic. I mean, they do damage to people. There's other mechanics in the dungeon journal, but don't see why they would be difficult. Unless they're tuned to be incredibly hard, it's basically just like passive. It's like a classic fight rate, really. But the cool part about that is that it now kind of like segues into the rest of the dungeon. There's a lot of, you know, us doing something with those guys is not like we didn't kill them, you know what I mean? Now they're helping us in the dungeon, which is really, really cool. But we're coming in again, these hard packs, man, lots of bleeds, lots of things going on, dodging stuff on the ground, and people are just getting slaughtered. Definitely a lot harder than the first dungeon. Whether or not you can learn anything from that, I don't know, but see that throw rock mechanic, it looks like you got to dodge that and make sure that especially DPS aren't getting hit by that, because they're going to get slaughtered. And then down here we have another double Berserker pack, so that means potentially having to dodge both of the things. The bludgeoned tank breaker does a lot of damage on these guys. It also slows you, so I have trouble getting out of that, and down goes me yet again. But now we're on to probably the most interesting boss I've seen so far out of all of the two dungeons. I really think this is going to be a cool Mythic Plus encounter, and it's going to be mostly interesting because there's a lot of target swapping. I feel like a lot of raid fights have this kind of thing, but very few actual Mythic Plus fights have this. So immediately you're going to see this giant blue circle. We need to get out of that, and that can be difficult when you're trying to gather ads, but all these ads are going to run in. One of them is the Geomancer, and he is going to be a caster, and the other three are ambushers. So this seems like a really good fight for Blood DK for a lot of reasons. The next mechanic is this quacking totem here. As you see right here on the screen, it is radiating out electrical damage or something like that. So yet again, another great one for Blood DK. We can throw down AMZ, put AMS up, and just all priority damage has to go into killing that thing as fast as possible. The longer they're out, the more difficult they get to deal with. And the only other mechanic he has is also happening right now. It's called Bloodlust. It does exactly what it sounds like it's going to do. It's going to give him and all his allies bloodlust. Basically dispatching the adds, and dealing with the totem is going to be incredibly important. And then on top of that, you know, the tank is going to do this thundering slam mechanic, which it's going to just be centered around where he's positioned. So you're going to have to constantly potentially either keep the, you see like how the totem is still in the thundering slam, like that's not good. Now people can't attack that, you know what I mean? So it's really going to be on the DPS to keep everything equitable here, because if you don't have enough damage to kill these adds and switch to these totems properly, then you're just going to fall behind. And I also should say that when the totem dies, it actually causes tremor. It says the totem causes a large tremor, stunning all Stone Vault Trogs, increasing their damage taken by 200%. So yeah, getting that totem killed and then leaving everything else down is definitely going to be the way to go. So at this point, usually you would go to the right here, but this is actually just right out of the original dungeon. The dwarves are actually going to come and help us with this, but as you can see, we're building the staff that is going to unlock the Irania. I don't know how you ever say that, but it's going to open this door. And the interesting part about this dungeon now is we're going to take a divergent path. So instead of having the keeper in here, we are going to have some dragonids and some stone guys. And in general, this is actually, you know, whenever you see a single trash mob, it's usually very dangerous, but this is a level 71 as well. Getting hit really hard just by a single mob is always a little scary. So I don't know, can you combine it? I think maybe you're going to probably have to. There's a single mob up here as well, and then there's another single one down in that hallway. So fighting each of these individually is going to be a pain. Now, there's really not, it's either you combine these two or maybe try to skip them in some way. I don't really know. But then we're going to come down in here and there's just mobs like hanging out in the corners that definitely don't need to be pulled. And the dwarves are going to come in here and open this door for us. Basically, guy gonna just like run into the pillar there. I don't know, it's quite charming to be honest. I really like this, but yet another amazing boss. This one's a really cool encounter. Let me explain to you what's actually going on here. So the boss generates energy over time. Stunning Talandris resets the ancient dynamo stacks, draining all of its energy. After 3 seconds, the dynamo resets and Talandris casts Inexorable and begins generating energy once more. So you're going to see the debuff on the character. Up here, it's called Inexorable. Talandris's defenses are hardened, making it immune to stun. There's 2 charges on it, so once you stun it, 1 charge goes away. This is a very strange encounter in my eyes, because actually stunning a boss seems like very rare, right? But you do that twice in 2 dungeons now, so I'm not exactly sure if stunning them with like actual stuns works, because I'm playing a build that doesn't have a stun anymore on my DK, but the way it's supposed to work is you're supposed to use the things on the ground to stun him. See, so he's going to put these really cool looking yellow orbs on it, and if anybody walks through them, they get stunned. Looks like somebody did actually stun him naturally though, because he has 1 stack now. The way I guess you're meant to do it is you're meant to drag him over that and it's going to consume them. We see what happens though if you are not mechanically adept. This guy's just standing too close to them and he gets knocked back into them. So there's a knockback on the fight as well. So obviously positioning is going to be important for that. But those circles that are on the player are actually going to spawn the mechanic. And then it looks like there's 1 extra as well. So those 2 spawn on players, and then there was a 3rd one as well. But in general, you know, once he enrages, this is when you want to be able to stun him. Upon reaching 100 energy, Talandris becomes unstoppable, making it immune to all crowd control abilities and increasing its damage done. So that's like the entire encounter again. Very actually kind of basic encounters, but they managed to do it well. Like, I'm really impressed with this. There's also these earthen shards, which you see on the paladin. Talandris heaves a blast of jagged stone at the target, inflicting physical damage and causing the target to bleed. So lots of bleeds, lots of debuffs in this encounter. And obviously the enraged portion is not going to work well with that. Thing is, if you stun him too quickly, then he's just going to keep putting it back up. So I think probably going to be like a small phase fight, right? Like you're going to have one phase of the fight be dictated by when you need to stun him perfectly. And can you handle that with just the group? I think honestly, maybe. It might be a hard fight to pug for that reason alone, because people might accidentally rip their stuns or they might not. And you as the tank might be, you know, concerned whether or not that's going to happen. And if you guys do it too quickly, then he'll just put them back up and then you won't actually have the ability to do it again because there won't be enough things on the ground. So here we have this debuff against axe debuff. Actually looks like it's part of these custodians. Lots of debuffs, lots of mechanics going on, lots of damage that hopefully can be handled with things like stuns and stuff. But, you know, compared to the first dungeon, I'm actually shocked at how much harder this trash is. And we do have a slightly optional pull here to the right. This is going to really depend on how count is handled in this dungeon because, you know, there's very few actual pieces of optional trash in this dungeon. So if they just make you pull like all of it, then at least we know like what to expect, right? Like you're gonna need a double pull here, but if it's gonna be kind of like Temple to Sethralis from back in BFA, where it's a straight line dungeon, but you actually have way too much count in that straight line, then I don't know. That just gets really annoying to me. I really don't enjoy that, and it really puts a lot of pressure on tanking and pugs. We have another new mob here, the Runic Protector. Does this fissuring slam, which I think is just hitting people near it and leaves some patches on the ground. Does Earthquake as well, which we know from Pokemon is a very strong move. Also looks like these guys are doing a cleave, so probably I meant to face them away. We've seen these guys a lot now, these custodians. They're like a mainstay in this dungeon. Now we're moving on into the beast area. I don't really know why there's only 2 spiders here. You can easily pull these though. This is actually going to be probably a really good place to combine. Looks like they do some kind of poison thing, but it's not indicating that it's dispellable. So you see a giant room filled with beasts. So yeah, we definitely could have pulled those first 2 and brought them here. Now you won't actually see it in this footage, but you can see in the top right here on the top of the screen, there's actually this rock thing. When you click it, it says something about having mining. It's something about like exposing a weak point if you have mining. Otherwise, it just has a health bar, and that health bar can just be killed. And then when you kill it, it's going to reveal a mole machine. So that mole machine will link up with another one at the very start of the dungeon, which is where you respawn every time you die in this dungeon. Then we just move on ahead, and there's a door leading us to the next boss. What a gorgeous room, by the way. My God, I just cannot get over how attractive this dungeon is. He's really not going to do a lot of mechanics either. These robots are going to come out and they're going to shoot balls. Want to make sure that obviously we're dodging that. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's that difficult, but they're coming from a lot of different areas. And here's the main mechanic. So this is like a really interesting phase. It's crossed between a lot of different mechanics we've seen over the past, but this is again something that you more likely see in a raid fight. Basically, these ads are channeling on the boss, and in order to leave the phase, we need to kill them, and he will just stop being channeled on, and then the phase will end. In the entire phase, we're taking fire damage. Doesn't look like it's stacking up or anything, but we're taking constant fire damage, so yet again, great AMZ and stuff like that. Otherwise, we need to get those things killed as fast as possible, and I've seen a lot of groups struggle with this now. You'll also see this unstable embers, which is just afflicting a random party member with fire dot. Does a lot of fire damage, and then hits anybody and expires on them. Probably going to complicate this fight, because obviously there's a lot of positional requirements on this encounter. It doesn't seem like it goes out during this phase here, so you just got to notice where the wall is. Big thing I think that you really need to do here, especially in Mythic Plus pugging, is to stay together. Everybody needs to stay together, because the healer is going to be all turned around. You see right now the healer is actually not near us, and he catches up, but that's not great. He's constantly out of range of us, so it's tough, but you know, this really benefits a mobile healer, and really Druid should be the best example for it. And he also does this frontal as well, which this is going to be like a frontal that he can turn and hit people with as well. So like you as the tank, I guess you're always going to get hit by that. Called Searing Clap. Inflicts fire damage to all enemies in front of the caster and inflicts enemies with burning heat. Spell inflicts additional fire damage over time, so it just puts a dot on everyone. And again, more trash hallways, lots going on in terms of trash in this dungeon. There's just so much of it. You really see the same mobs over and over again too, so I don't know if people like that or not, but Thunderous Clap here on this guy hits the whole party for a bunch of damage. Sounds like something that would be nature. Kind of just like one packs, you know, like you really can't separate any of these mobs. You really can't bring them into the next pack either. They're so far away. I think people will probably have to find ways to do it at times, but you know, like I said, I look at Sanguine Depths as a great example, because it's a dungeon that is really on rails, right? And at times it seems almost silly how on rails it is, but it's tuned so well that the trash just never really matters. Like as long as you don't wipe to bosses, you upgrade that key. So I hope that this will be the same case. This trash is a lot more difficult though. As you see, this hail of stone is doing damage to everyone, so this will be a mechanic you really want to try to interrupt or grip. And now we come up to a very interesting part of the dungeon. This is really strange. There's just 2 custodians, 4 mobs, small mobs, and then there's this earthen guardian, and he's going to do a ton of tank damage. He's also going to do this blessing of Tyr. I still don't know how you say this, but basically it's a mechanic that when you stand in it, it does a bunch of damage to you, and I think it like protects the ads or something like that. But it just seems really strange to me that there's just like this like random mini boss patrolling with these other mobs. Now I've done this dungeon a few times now, and pulling all 4 of these together seems like it really does need to happen. But man, it's a dangerous pack. On fortified weeks and these guys' health pool is high, tank is going to get absolutely smacked, and probably the group too. Now again, another pack that is actually skippable. We could not have pulled those and just ran hug the left here up the stairs, but I think this is probably a good place to combine. Obviously we really be getting the next pack too. There's 2 like stone dudes up here, more ebon stone golems we could have combined into the other pack as well. Very fair amount of damage. I mean, the healer's really going to be taxed in this dungeon, it seems, but this probably might actually be one of the hardest fortified dungeons, depending on what the affixes and stuff are. Like, I feel like, you know, the seasonal affix is going to play a big part into this. I can't imagine what it would be. This might not even be in season 1, of course. Moving on into the central chambers, you know, again, this part looks really familiar. Again, 2 very basic packs that you can probably have combined into one pull if you're adventurous. It's going to be like a test of that, you know, and maybe even you could skip this because the room is quite wide. Probably skip one of these packs. And here we go. This is like a really interesting part of the dungeon. We have some dragon, like some bronze dragon coming out here, basically confirming that they are going to be a central theme in the bad guy aspect of this expansion. The infinite Dragonflight. We haven't fought them in a while, but they are back, summoning in a bunch of them. So again, we have a bunch of very small pulls. We have 2 agents here, and down to our left, we have a single mob, which I definitely need to be combining at this point. Looks like they're putting some kind of bleed on me yet again. They also cast this ability Hasten, which sounds like it would just make them attack faster, do something faster. That is interruptible though. That's pretty clear that you probably want to interrupt that. This guy is grippable, so as you see, we definitely should have just gripped him into this pack to create a little group of 3 here. This guy's doing some debuff on us. It looks like it's stacking pretty fiercely too. Again, it's relatively inconsequential. You really can't be pulling these individually, so. And this one definitely needs to be combined as well. Single mob. Big pack coming up here, and this is actually really cool because these mobs are all really easily combined, and they're actually quite fun to fight because there's tons of whelps. Maybe on certain affixes this will be a pain, but yeah, we're just gonna get 3 of these time reavers, tons of these infinite whelps. See how many there are. It's so cool. I actually quite like packs like this where there's just like honestly kind of a bunch of fodder. But yeah, this debuff, I think it's a haste debuff. Yeah, I think the more stacks of it we have, the less haste we have. So having 3 of these being fought obviously is not ideal, but it's just not really, like, it doesn't matter what these mechanics are unless they like heal each other to full when they die. You got to pull all of them. Yeah, there we go. Haste reduced by 44% and movement speed also reduced. So that just stacks up infinitely. I do test it here though, and I AMS it. It stops applying to me. It just seems like it just kind of radiates out from them. There's no way to stop it from what I can tell, but I did AMS and it stopped the application of it. So that's it. That's the last pack of the trash in the dungeon. And now we have the final boss of the dungeon, which is another really cool room and honestly a very visually splendorous encounter. The first thing I say when I was doing this live is just how good this dragon looks, man. And I have to bring it up, even though this video is not really meant to be about that. It's just not something I could ignore. It's so gorgeous looking. It looks so smooth, man. It's actually going to be kind of sad to go back to like old dungeons, you know, dungeons from MoP while you have bosses that look so good in them. But here we have another frontal that's actually another one of these things that is just going to follow the tank and is fully movable. Sand Breath, chrono-lord Dios breathes out time-altering sand, inflicting damage to all players in front of him, which again is really not a hard mechanic, but it's going to be complicated by the fact that the rest of the mechanics are going to potentially eat up space in the room. So we have this eternity orb, which seems like an incredibly important mechanic on the fight, but at first glance I really couldn't figure it out. It says chrono-lord Dios calls forth an eternal orb made of sand which falls from above. When it strikes the ground, it inflicts damage to all players and forms an eternity zone. The eternity zone then drains the time away from players caught within the zone, inflicting damage every second and reducing their haste by 30 seconds. So I mean, to me that sounds like something that can be soaked, but I try to soak it multiple times and it doesn't seem to stop placing the debuff on the ground. I don't know if maybe the soak prevents the damage to the whole group, because as you'll see when they hit the ground they do a small amount of damage to the whole group, but the big mechanic is coming up. Every time he does a mechanic he drains some of his energy, and then he's going to do this rewind time flow. Rewind time flow reverses the flow of time, restoring his own temporal energy while inflicting damage to all players. While this is in effect, eternity orbs and zones revert to temporal orbs and zones. While time is being reversed, a temporal orb will float upwards, backwards towards its point of creation. While time is being reversed, a temporal zone will funnel lost time back into the players, increasing their haste. So while this mechanic is going on, I mean, I don't know like if there's anything you can do with those orbs. Maybe they would hit you on the way up or something like that, but it seems to say that you're supposed to stand in the puddle. So yeah, probably quickly stack up, stand in the puddle, big haste, and kill boss. I don't know. It's a really interesting looking encounter. I feel like there's probably more to it than that, but yeah, this dungeon has a lot of really interesting stuff going on in it, man. I really have to say, it's got probably one of the best visual aesthetics I could imagine as well. Like, I think it's just so strong because, you know, we've been here so often, but you see this room down here and you can't actually get here, but my God, it just looks so great, man. These giant statues, and it's just very grandiose, isn't it? So I don't know, in terms of Mythic Plus, this is the dungeon that's actually going to be present in the pre-patch as well. So I would imagine that this will be a Season 1 Mythic Plus dungeon, but maybe they'll hold it back for Season 2 for the same reason. So could go either way, but hope this has helped you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we will see you guys in the next video.